Welcome, everyone, to today's session. I'm Mike D'Agostino, General Manager with Cyber Theory, and your host for today's webinar entitled Selling AI to CISOs. First, to set a bit of context for this session, our futurist friends would have us believe that artificial intelligence stands as a potential revolutionary force, offering unparalleled capabilities to detect, analyze, and counteract threats. Yet, for vendors, effectively positioning AI-enhanced solutions to chief information officers, technology officers, security officers, and others demands a bit of a refined approach distinct from conventional sales strategies. The webinar you are attending is crafted for vendor marketers and sales representatives aiming to adeptly market their AI-enhanced products to businesses of all shapes and sizes. I'm joined by my colleague, Julie Jordan, Director of Marketing Strategy, along with our esteemed panelists, including Heather West, the Senior Director of Cybersecurity and Privacy Services at Venable, and John Washburn, the CISO with Stoll Reeves. Julie, Heather, and John, welcome, and please quickly introduce yourselves for our audience today. Julie, why don't you start off?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. I am Julie Jordan. I'm the Director of Marketing and Media Strategy for Cyber Theory. My background includes marketing for cybersecurity and AI solutions, along with other technologies like IoT and drones for companies that are startups through to enterprises, including IBM. So happy to be in the conversation today.
Great. Going around the screen. How about you, Heather?
Thanks. Excited to be here today. As you mentioned, I'm a senior director at Venable. I'm not a lawyer, although we are a law firm. But what I do is a lot of translation. And what that means for this context is helping folks understand these revolutionary technologies and how they can fit in to their business in a way that feels safe and is compliant and manages risk. So obviously there's a lot of overlap there with cybersecurity as an industry. This has been the forefront. So I spend a lot of time working with clients who are really excited about these technologies and want to make sure they do it right.
Perfect. Glad to have you. And John?
Yeah, as mentioned, hi, John Washburn. I'm the CISO at Stoll Reeves. In addition to being responsible for information security, I also am the compliance officer. I'm responsible for records governance and business intake. I also serve as the vice chair of the executive committee for the legal services ISO. And here at the firm, I'm also client facing in the sense that I'm a resource for our privacy and data security teams, practice teams. And so also get involved in, assisting clients with things like responding to data security incidents or policy and procedure updates and risk assessments and that kind of a thing.
Great. Well, glad to have you as well. And it sounds like we've got two excellent panelists to walk us through our agenda. And just a bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded and everyone on today will be notified when the recording is available. Feel free to revisit and or share with your colleagues as you see fit. Well, let's jump right in as we have a decent agenda to get through over the next 45 minutes or so. And let's start off with a few foundational questions around AI before we get into technology implementation and bits and bytes. It's important, I think, that we cover these items as these are the foundational concerns that businesses have around AI implementation. And the better vendors understand those concerns, the better position they will be in to craft and market a product that addresses those concerns. So to kick it off from a very high level, let me just ask, we'll get it out there. What do you see as the current state of AI understanding and adoption? And what are some of the, more importantly, very core concerns that CISOs and other security practitioners have about implementing AI? And we'll dive into a couple more along this line of thinking. But Heather, why don't you start things off for us if you could?
Sure, it's a big question. The current state of things is everyone has questions. I think that there's, some very good questions, but we can start with a really basic one. What do we mean when we say artificial intelligence? Everyone's talking about it. It's really cool. It shows up in all the science fiction movies. It's on the front page of the New York Times all the time. And everyone is really excited about this ambiguous opportunity, but also really worried about these really ambiguous risks. And so I want to start by saying that artificial intelligence is all around us, but we're not really talking today about some of the basics. But I like to kind of remind folks that AI has been in our lives for a long time. When I hit the reheat button on my microwave, that's AI. It's using sensor data to tell me when I'm done cooking, and then I get my lunch, and that's great. But we have seen this attention to AI coming out in no small part because of the new cool AI that's now available to the public, and some of the new cool AI that's available to CISOs and all of these businesses. We haven't really been talking about AI that way until recently, though. We haven't really been saying, okay, when I'm using my word processor, there's a ton of AI happening. When I like the spam filter in my email, there is a ton of AI being used. These systems are incredibly cool, but nobody really feels like they understand them. And that's really driving this concern and this fear. And I don't want to like undermine that. That is valid. And part of, I think, what we're going to discuss today is ways to think about the risks and ways to think about utilizing these technologies in ways that are really beneficial once you kind of feel like you have a handle on them. One of the things that I tell folks, though, is that we have some of the tools and frameworks to really begin thinking about using artificial intelligence and addressing some of these concerns so that we can move forward and really harness them in a helpful way.
Great. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree, we've had AI for a long time. And for years, there's been a lot of inflation of things like machine learning as AI. What everybody sees as AI right now is generative AI. Everybody's picking on one particular model, like large language models, and calling that AI, when in fact we've had AI in many of our cybersecurity tools for years. We've long ago gone beyond the signature detection, and we still have to have it as a layer in the onion for cybersecurity. But what we really do here, and what I think most sophisticated organizations do, is you're looking at things like behavior detection, at anomalies, at aggregating data together for things like EDR, XDR, what have you. And in order to do that, we need the assistance of artificial intelligence in order to keep pace with the rapidly changing threat landscape. We have been sending our SIM collection data, for example, into a cloud-based AI for a few years. And that allows our managed service provider to work with us to better correlate data 24/7 and determine, is something really a potential incident, or is it some kind of anomaly, is it false positive, et cetera. I think when we look at AI technologies, whether they're cybersecurity related AI technologies or whether they're new LLM technologies, at least here in legal, many of our firms, both of ours, for example, are looking at to do tasks that are usually done by humans or to assist humans in doing tasks better. Regardless of which one of those you use, what we look for in AI is a trustworthy environment that is transparent so that we and the vendor both understand, at least at a surface level, how it works. One of the risks, I think, with AI is many of the vendors we've spoken to, especially in the LLM space, it's kind of a black box. Even the designers of the LLM don't exactly know how it's arriving at its conclusions. And as we'll talk about a bit later with some of the risks, there's a lot of risk around potentially governance, output quality, speed of response, whether or not something has been misinterpreted or hallucinated. Even if you can stem hallucinations in an environment or limit them, you may not be able to limit the misinterpretation factor. And these are the kind of questions we're going to ask of our solution providers when they bring the AI in. Is how mature is it? What kind of data was it trained on? Is it training on our data? The answer should be no. You know, there are a host of factors that come out now as we see AI creeping more into our environment where it's pulling all of our data instead of just, say, telemetry or metadata from our information security systems.
Yeah, all great points, and we're going to cover them in a couple of seconds. But it almost seems to me, it sounds funny, but it's almost like AI and machine learning is having a renaissance moment. I remember back at the RSA conference in, the mid 2000 teens even, that's really when you started to hear about AI, and there are a couple of very well-known vendors that, almost their entire product is built around, some kind of artificial intelligence capabilities. But I think that many practitioners almost looked at that as more marketing speak than reality. And now that, maybe the masses have access to the generative AI tools and large language models, that it's being taken a bit more seriously now. But I know that there are a couple of vendors probably saying, hey, we were on the AI train, 7, 8 years ago. Why is everybody all of a sudden interested? So again, a little bit of a renaissance moment. But continuing with the risk management theme, I want to cover a couple of those topics up front. John, you started to get into it. What do you see as the key risks associated with AI deployment in terms of specifically governance and also privacy? And how can organizations proactively manage these risks? And again, the insights here are to hopefully provide our audience, the vendor, marketers, the people that are developing these products, what do they need to be aware of as far as what's on the minds or the concerns of enterprises that are looking to adopt these technologies?
Yeah, so I'm in an AI working group. One of the things we talked about in the last few months, I have a kind of an edge opinion. I don't think there is a way to restrict the data going into the AI. I think it's a fool's errand to try and say, oh, you won't put PII in it, or you won't put EPHI in it, or like people are just going to do it. You may not feed that data in, you may have labels for that data, and you may try and restrict it in labeling, but one way or another, it's going to get in. For the AI solutions, we need to focus on compensating controls or corrective controls for that, or focus on ways to make the AI behave like a fiduciary, like someone you trust implicitly, like, you would trust an attorney. One of those ways we've seen in AI solutions to solve this problem are data remnants or lack thereof. So I've looked at a few AI solutions where the governance policy is, when you put data into the AI solution, it will not train on my data. And I can tell you that is a requirement of all our solutions. There is no AI solution that will train on our data. If you're going to train your AI, you're going to do it with model data that you manage separately, not any of the confidential information we might put into it. And B is the retention policy. So one solution I really like has the users upload, for example, a document or contract through the browser into this AI solution, ask it to analyze it, which it does, and then the AI solution presents in the browser the analysis. If the user closes the browser, it's gone and they have to do it over again. It's that effective. It's not saved anywhere in the AI solution. It is presented back to you on the screen, and that's it. That is the only place it exists. And you can always ask it again or upload the document again. But from the vendor perspective, the vendor said, hey, we don't want to be involved in GDPR, CCPA, COPPA, any of these privacy regulations that could get us in trouble because we happen to have some kind of sensitive information in our environment and someone wants to assert one of their rights on that information. Instead, we will use our AI tool to analyze the data and put it back to you. And then after that, it's gone. In the cybersecurity space, we are looking for data that is reliable. And many solutions, I won't get on my soapbox about DLP, but there are solutions out there that generate a lot of false positives. And when we're looking at an AI solution that's going to do analysis for a cybersecurity purpose, we want it to be able to look at our meta information, at our traffic. We're still collecting raw traffic in addition to log traffic. It has to be able to look at both. And it has to be able to give us an answer that we can trust, that we think is at least some degree in the 90s of reliability, so that we're not going to get flooded with a bunch of false positives because the AI isn't able to interpret the signal properly and think something is a critical risk when in reality it is something else.
Nice.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Heather.
No, I was going to say all of those are really important. I think, when I'm chatting with folks, I start pretty basic. You know, one of the most important things to know is whether the tool is a good fit for what you need. And I say that because a lot of folks get really, really excited about this technology, and for good reason, but applying the wrong tool to the wrong task can be fairly disastrous, because you're excited and it looks like this awesome Band-Aid, and you're going to stick it on your system. And it's not going to do what you thought it was going to do, or it's going to try really, really hard and fail, because maybe it wasn't trained to be accurate in the way that you thought. It's going to give you really well-crafted results, but they're not going to be accurate. Or it's going to give you results for the wrong problem. Or it's going to give you, as John was saying, a bunch of false positives. I think that that's something that the cybersecurity space has had to deal with a lot. You know, how are you tuning these systems? Do you want false positives? Do you want false negatives? And how much on either side are you willing to err? But another piece of the risk management theme I think is really important is training and education for your employees. Help them know what these systems are for. Help them know when to say something doesn't look right. Because all of these problems are going to manifest somehow. And if we like a science fiction movie kind of trust the AI system and it's not ready, then we have problems. You know, proactively managing these risks also, you know, takes a lot from other governance and management issues that we know better. You know, some of the data governance, some of the security governance. We can translate all of these into the AI space because these tools are just additive on top of those problems.
Yeah. Heather, I think you gave a lot of security awareness training companies a good idea there as far as evolving their products.
It's clearly a market.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
It's true. I mean, AI training is a top concern of everyone I've spoken to. How do I use it? I mean, right now, being a prompt engineer is a useful tool for end users. I think it's going to have the lifespan of parachute pants as a fashion as far as the user community goes, because I think all the AI companies right now are going to mop up all the really good prompt engineers and do like every other social media company has done for all of us over the years and engineer it so we don't have to be great at that. So the AI will prompt us instead to say, well, would you like to make this more specific to your industry, or do you want me to give you a general answer? How confident do you want me to be? You know, the kind of things we have to think about now to type in are going to become more, you know, table stakes later. However, right now, that is the issue. How do I know that my users will use it? Will they adopt it? We've all seen some pretty crazy pricing models in AI right now because it's the fashion and it's new and it's very expensive to run the models, at least right now, although we're seeing those costs drop significantly pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Are you seeing
If we're going to invest that kind of money, we need to make sure that people will use it.
Sorry, John, I was just going to ask, are you seeing any AI solution vendors get proactive in that particular need in terms of outlining process roadmaps for adoption or implementation, or is that completely at the moment left up to the buyer?
No, I think we've been pushing back successfully and relatively easily lately, where I think like, for example, in the LLM based space, people came out and said, here's what it's going to cost per head, and you're going to sign everybody up. And we said, no, we need to sign up a small group because I need to create some evangelists internally who will help me sell it to other people. Because otherwise it's a big change. People are afraid of change, and people are going to be really afraid of a change of this magnitude if they haven't had any training, they don't know what it is. And so they may just say, well, I'm perfectly happy with my existing process. And what we tried to tell people is it doesn't work anymore. Whether it's security or the work you're doing as a professional, AI is enhancing all of this. You have to learn how to use it. So I'll tell people AI is not coming for your job unless you don't learn how to use AI. Then it is. And so how do we get that adoption? We have to get certain people on first who will see the value and help us sell it. It doesn't matter what the AI-based solution is. When we do cybersecurity controls, cybersecurity solutions, we go look at those and say, okay, this thing does a great task. I won't be specific, but there are many, many layers to our solution stack. We don't want to have overlap wherever possible. Zero overlap would be ideal. More than 10% overlap, I'm going to go back to both vendors and say, why aren't you doing this other thing too? We like to have synergy and that kind of stuff, but at the same time, we don't want to just blanket roll it out to the entire environment. We want to have a small group first. So we'll do pilot projects for that kind of thing, and usually that works. But for anything that faces end users, even say something like password management or password vaulting solution, I can't get everybody to jump in all at once. And I also don't want to pay for necessarily 900 of these things all at once when I'm going to have people adopt on a trend, over months and months and months, especially if it's an optional solution. So I want to go back to the vendor and say, can I get some kind of good pricing model on a small group first and expand it over time? That's the kind of thing we're looking for that makes projects successful. I can't tell you how many projects we've had. I can go back through a list where we have done exactly this and rolled something out and then incrementally grew it until it basically encompassed the whole user environment. And I think we're looking for that same thing with AI. I know there's a lot of upfront investment in the AI infrastructure that vendors have to use to build these solutions, but not all of us are ready to jump in with both feet on every single solution and say, sure, let me cover the entire environment at this price when I only think I'm going to get 10% of the people to sign up in the first 3 months.
That's right. The cost of the change management alone, especially when you're marketing and selling these solutions to enterprises, it's extremely high. So there has to be this kind of phased implementation approach, probably for best success.
Yeah, yep. To create advocates internally, no doubt, no doubt. And I think, John, you're the one, if memory serves, you mentioned sort of the alphabet soup of privacy issues out there. So, we know these companies, everybody wants to, implement these innovative solutions and bring AI into the mix. But how do you balance the drive for implementing innovation with the need to comply with existing and eventually emerging regulatory frameworks, especially when considering larger organizations that have, a very diverse geographical footprint dealing with regulatory issues in many different environments? How do you recommend to people that they kind of balance that? Heather, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So again, this is where people are asking the right questions. I think, even 6 months ago, folks were saying AI is unregulated and it's the Wild West. And if we're using AI, there are no rules. And I think there's an understanding now that that's not the case. AI is a tool. Regulation applies regardless of the tool that you use. And so I unfortunately don't have a quick and easy answer. The actual answer is that it's going to take all of the same diligence and all of the same governance that you have for any of these tools. And it's not the interesting, sexy part of AI. It is the part where you're making sure that you don't kind of go too fast, though, and make the mistakes that really scare folks about this. And I think, John, your point about pilot programs is a good one here. Playing around, making sure it does what it says, making sure that you don't have compliance concerns. Once you've done all of that, going through and understanding the contractual terms, is the tool, is something that they're saying sound wrong in terms of the compliance piece, but it's a lot of legwork.
Yeah, and maybe just to piggyback on that for John, given his involvement with compliance in general, have you seen any tools or evaluated anything that sort of gave you concern because it didn't look like it was meshing with any sort of regulatory mandates?
So I'll start this off by saying I forgot to say at the start, I'm not a lawyer either. But it's funny, we're both from law firms, so you're asking us a question about compliance. Of course we're going to comply. We recommend compliance. And I think Heather's right. Like she already said, the answer is there is no easy answer. I mean, we can't, there's no out that you have to avoid complying with these privacy requirements or any of these other laws. There's no, I get a safety here because I do this or whatever. I think you have to roll it in just like you roll security into any development or project. So like we have a secure software development life cycle. I think we need a secure, and I'd also add safe AI development lifecycle. So if I'm going to use an AI tool to automate something, I think that's one of my, at least my biggest fears is you're going to introduce this new tool, you're going to test it, it's going to look okay, and then you're going to build something on the end of it that's going to automate something. Now, in our industry where it's documents and emails, well, there's potential risk, but at least it's relatively safe. But if you're in manufacturing, now what if you automate something at the tail end of the AI and it sends a bad instruction and kills someone? We have to make sure that we really put these constraints around the AI, that we fully understand how they do what they do before we really build anything on top of them or implement them in our environments. For example, AI secure solutions. AI security solutions, we have that AI tool that looks at all of our telemetry data, our network information, and alerts us to things. What we haven't done is built any real automated response off of it, nor has our MSP. Because what we don't want it to do is take action based on that data on what is still a relatively new environment and go do something like shut down all the firewalls because it thinks something is happening when it really isn't and causing a disruption. We, as say, again, we in our industry have a relative level of safety, but you could argue too that even with personal information documentation, you could make a situation unsafe if you expose it. What if you have particular medical information or protected information on an individual and it becomes public? Now that individual's, sanity, life, mental health, whatever could be at risk because this top secret information has been exposed. So confidentiality is also critically important. And I think as we all come into this new world of generative AI, most of our practical experience, unless we're in one of these pilot projects with an emerging technology, is using ChatGPT, which remarkably, people still haven't read the terms of service and realize that it's public and fallible. I just saw another news report yesterday of a lawyer in Colorado who apparently didn't read the terms of service and are using the output of these tools professionally without vetting them. And as we go into these new AI solutions, this goes back to that trust comment I made earlier. Can you, the vendor, give me a level of confidence that what I am getting from your AI-powered tool is reliable, is accurate, and is timely? I don't want to get a alert that happened 3 days ago that has been flagged as an emergency that is wrong, right? And maybe 50% accurate. Like all that kind of stuff makes the product not, I would say, not valuable. It's actually more of a risk to have it than to not have it, because now I'm inserting bad information into my environment. So what can you do to instill that confidence in us? And someone like me may ask to see some kind of white paper or other supporting documentation that's quantitative that can give me that level of confidence.
Yeah, great. All great points. And you've touched on data and I guess data privacy to a large degree. You were talking about a solution that you'd upload a document or a contract, and if you close the browser, it goes away. I assume you've been instilled with some sense of confidence that that is actually happening, right? That
Right.
It's not being stored anywhere or anyone's going to get access to that information. Are we at the point where it's, I'm reading the terms of service and I'm just going to have faith and believe you that that's what's happening? Or how do you kind of, accept those data privacy issues?
Yeah, I mean, general explanations are good enough. I guarantee you it's saved in our document management system when I get that email response. We also, for all of our vendors that store, access, process, or transmit confidential information, we require at minimum SOC 2 Type 2 annual attestation or ISO 27001 certification, or both. So you're going to have one or the other or both, or something equivalent. And every December, this is the month that we go back to the vendors and do the annual attestation verification. For some vendors, depending on the level of data that you handle, you might be asked for other things like executive summaries of your annual third-party penetration tests, output from any tools that you use to vet your software security, vulnerability assessments, etc. We try and do as much diligence as we can because we're comprehensively ISO 27001 certified. So any information you give us that we put anywhere, all of those services are covered under our certification, which means some of those are cloud service providers and vendors. So I have to drive down those same requirements to all of our vendors to make sure that our certification remains comprehensive. And that when the client comes to us and says, how do you know that you're enforcing the same level of security control on every one of your subsidiaries? This is how we do it. I think the transparency level could improve. So for that one solution, I did get a written email-based description of how it works. I didn't get a diagram because that's proprietary information, but I got enough to instill some level of confidence. But that's not every solution where I would have that same control. We're looking at using a information governance based solution using AI that's going to have access to our internal data. For that one, it's going to be limited to only our data. It's not going to touch the internet. Because it's constrained by our data, I might want that data to live in the environment for maybe 2 weeks or 30 days or 60 days. It's still going to be in a cloud environment, but it's going to be our instance of the environment. And it's also going to mesh with some other data that this provider has already curated so that we can do searches on kind of our data set plus this curated data set of information that they hold. If we're going to do that, I'm okay with it living longer, but I still am going to want to know about all their other controls, because now it's a lot different if it's a user putting something into a browser than if I've now created some kind of connection between our confidential and very important data store and theirs. Now the control plane changes, and I'm going to want more evidence and more attestation around how that's controlled and how secure that is. So it really depends on the vendor, but I think for any of you vendors out there with AI solutions, you should expect us, Heather and me and everybody else, to come back to you and want to see real documentation, really quantitative, specific answers about how you're securing our information, or how you're making sure our information doesn't stick around and maybe just securing it in transit and not retaining it in memory anywhere else that would expand our risk so that if you get compromised, we get compromised.
And I think it's worth noting, John, there that you just ran through a bunch of the frameworks that we already have to evaluate this stuff. I think we know how to think about it, and we know how to kind of apply these frameworks and this evaluation, this risk management to these new problems. And I think that's actually, if there's one take home for the folks that I work with, it is, I want them to know that we have those solutions and systems in place. And yes, are they going to have to think about it a little bit differently if you're talking about a cutting edge generative AI system? Yeah. But that's actually the part that they need to do, is figure out where that translation is so that they feel comfortable with it. And what the risk in that context is determines how rigorous that has to be.
Absolutely. Well, a lot to consider for product vendors out there when they get asked about all of the security controls, but I'm sure they're used to that, dealing with a lot of sensitive data in general. It just comes down to how it's being retained and used. Now, and we have a few minutes left here. Definitely wanted to jump into some technology items, and bear with me here as I rattle off a couple of product categories. One of the aspects of the entire discourse on AI utilization is the general lack of details as to the actual use cases. I see so much about AI governance and all the items that we just discussed around risk management, which are very, very important foundational items about how AI should be controlled to whatever degree. But what about the actual use cases, right? John, you mentioned a few of them. Given how in tune we are with the vendor community, we've been able to identify several product and service areas where AI is already being introduced. So again, bear with me as I rattle off a few of these. One is threat intelligence platforms, where AI is being used to analyze vast data sets for emerging threats and vulnerabilities. You have endpoint protection solutions, which are leveraging machine learning to detect and respond to anomalous activities. You have network security products, which are utilizing AI for real-time traffic analysis and anomaly detection. And then you have identity and access management solutions, which are implementing AI to detect behavioral anomalies and potential unauthorized, access. So let's get to it. It sounds like you are already using products and services that have incorporated AI to any significant degree. It sounds like you're already being pitched by vendors on new product offerings that claim to incorporate AI. Like, how do you cut through the noise and really kind of evaluate or determine the offerings and solutions that you feel are true difference makers as opposed to marketing speak?
Yeah, I guess I start. So we're using all those things you talked about. So we are a fully
Good.
multi-factor environment, our users and our devices. So our devices are something they have and something they are, and our users are something they have and either something they know or something they are. And we utilize a cloud-based AI-powered solution that determines that authentication process by looking at the device itself and the behavior of the device. Where is it? Where was it yesterday? Where was it, a few hours ago? What IP address does it have? How is it moved around? Is it still in the software state that it was when it last connected to me, et cetera? Does it have its TPM embedded certificate? And then it goes through all of that. And then I, as a user, log in, and then I am logging in with my hardware device. That has to be one of those specific authenticated devices. And then I am also providing either a face or a thumbprint or a PIN or a password, your choice. Most of our users aren't really using their passwords anymore, but they still have to have them. And so in order to do that, and also look at the identity of the user, is the user in a weird spot? Is the user logged in anywhere else? Do I have an impossible login scenario? How many times did the user have to type this password if they decide to use the password? It uses the onboard chip to determine, am I wearing my glasses or not? It can look at me both ways. So we're using these kind of tools now just for verification. Then we have a whole thing with federation. We federate with all of our solutions, so I don't want a user to ever have to type in a password anywhere. If they log into our domain, I want to control it. We have to have powerful solutions to do that. On the endpoints, I mentioned earlier that we still need to look at signatures. I mean, we have to. But the days of I'm running an antivirus and I'm protected are long gone. And so we are using AI-powered tools that look at scripts that an attacker might be running. Even in the user context, is this script legitimate? How do I know? Well, if I'm an AI, I'm going to have to look at the script and determine, is this something that's dangerous or not? I have to do that in real time because I don't want to disrupt the business. The user's got to be able to run that. I'm talking like PowerShell or VB or what have you. And then applications. Is the application legitimate? We use an application control solution that does allow listing with a vast data set. I think if I printed out the XML page, it's like 400 pages or something. But we've built it over many years. And so these solutions are things we have now, but we're always looking to add. And what we're looking to do is cover all these corners. I mean, we pay a third party to come in twice a year, 2 different third parties. And one of them does basically what we call a white box test. So they come and see everything and we share everything with them and they help us find if we have any vulnerabilities left. Then in Q3, we hire a hacker, not an entire red team, but a hacker to come inside. We give them access as a user with the MFA tokens and everything else. We let them in our environment as a user and say, come after us and see what they can do internally. And then if they find anything, then we correlate that back with our other vendor and we keep going like, what can we stop, right? What have we stopped? What do we need to stop next? And so right now, what am I looking at in AI solutions, right? We're looking at things that can stop Kerberos-based attacks like overpass. We're looking for things that can do authentication fencing or management for system accounts. Because even though we have a PAM that we run all of our administrative accounts room. We use MFA and segregation and key rotation and all that kind of stuff on those accounts. It still doesn't solve every problem. We added a solution a while back for doing Active Directory immutable object level backups, because we already have an immutable backup solution, but we only retain backups for 30 days. So what if someone pops my Active Directory environment? I don't find out for 31 days. I don't have a good environment in my system. I can't go pull it out of the backup. So we needed another solution for that could keep a cloud-based, always verified backup of our Active Directory environment, in perpetuity, so that if something like that happened, we wouldn't have to go fully brick level restore our Active Directory environment. So there's always something, right? And I think what we're looking for in vendors is impress us with your knowledge, show us how you are solving a specific problem that no one else can solve, and how you're doing so in a way that doesn't overlap significantly with any of the existing solutions we have. And if you're going to come at me and say, well, I overlap 50%, but we're better at X than this vendor is, that's fine. But you have to realize that if I have this vendor and they do 12 things for me, I'm not going to want to replace them because you do one thing that they do in addition to what you do, right? You have to think about this environment and learn from the customer what they have, what their environment is like, especially if they have a mature program. They're already going to have a lot of controls in place, and they're not going to look to resolve a problem that they've already solved. I think with AI too, I remember when blockchain came out, I had a friend that joked with me and said, it's a solution looking for a problem to solve. And I think some AI solutions that get presented to us by vendors are that. They like, well, we have this great thing and it does these magical things. That's great, but what problem of mine are you solving? Because I may have already solved this problem with something else. Or if you can make the solution better, tell me specifically how. Don't run through a canned demo. Show me, this thing that you have that's a canned demo, and then try and sell me on how great it is without me engaging with you on specific questions. Any vendor out there that's presented to me before knows that I'm probably going to interject in the first 10 minutes and start asking questions and probably redirect the demo. Or if you have canned examples, that's great. I'll see your canned examples, but I'm going to want you to do some live examples too.
That's great. Great. It sounds like you've implemented quite a few solutions already that incorporate AI in some way, shape, or form. You're not just using it for marketing language. Yeah. And Heather, are you aware of anything that your firm has implemented that you can speak of, or anything? Or
well, I'm not sure exactly what the firm has implemented. I will say that it is everywhere. I think John did a very good job of running through how AI gets injected at every step of thinking through cybersecurity, because at the end of the day, AI is better at dealing with huge amounts of data than we are. And that is something that I tell clients and others, at the end of the day, cybersecurity is incredibly dependent on AI. We couldn't really do this with human brains, not at this speed, not with this amount of data, not with this many interactions. And so at a very high level, it's really best practice to have these AI systems augmenting the work that the teams are doing. And I do think that I'll reiterate kind of what John was saying about what it takes to convince folks that these are good ideas. And that it is not just your old marketing material and you scribbled with AI on it, because I've seen a fair bit of that, and it is probably accurate. Your tool probably does have AI in it, but what is it adding? What additional benefit is there, and how is it actually helping protect people? So I think that a lot of this is sitting down and saying, cool, is there something unique here? Is there something new here to what John was saying, that can be more helpful and solve a problem that maybe it's a new problem and it hasn't really been addressed before, or maybe it's an old problem addressed in a new way.
Yeah.
I love the way you said this, scribbled it down. It made me think, I'll date myself, but I remember when putting a little lowercase I in front of everything was like the revolution.
Well, that's how you know it's cool.
Yeah, that's how you know it's cool. It's like we saw the iPhone. I mean, that was the cool thing. And I think if you just say like AI, you add AI to you scribble AI on it, we're going to call bullshit on it. I mean, I'm not going to litigate the difference between machine learning and AI. Like, if you want to call it AI, fine, whatever. I don't care. But to Heather's point, you're going to have to show me something compelling. You're going to have to show me how it does something with the AI in a way that it couldn't do before, and that all my other tools or other solutions can't do, and that makes a very compelling argument. It's gonna be a challenge, like, to organizations that don't have a lot of security in place or don't have a mature program yet, or still working on program maturity. I think you're going to have a different challenge, because you're going to try and sell AI to an organization that doesn't know how to budget for it and doesn't know what they need. So you're probably going to have to explain the problem to solve to them. But to, companies like ours, we're likely going to explain our problem to you, and you're going to have to tailor that response in a way that makes specific sense to us. So it's going to be a harder hill to climb up in a different way, right? Like, we generally do have the budget for these kind of projects, because I would say next to financial, the legal industry likely has the highest level of confidentiality, probably maybe even more so than finance. And we take security, governance, managing data just as seriously, if not more so, than anyone else. And so we're going to have the kind of programs, projects, budgets that need this kind of thing. But as Michael said earlier, right, as you said earlier, we're getting besieged by these vendors. I mean, just flooding us with AI this and AI that and all that. And we are going to cut through that and get rid of 95% of that noise by asking you these specific questions and looking for those really, pointed differentiators.
We actually often see that with a lot of our clients who will use the technology as the lead message, when really we need to be talking about what problems are being solved by the technology. And it happens all along the way. So if clients can see, or vendors can see, the type of challenge that you might encounter on a day-to-day basis, it could be a very common challenge, but if they can come in with the message about the challenge being solved, and then back that up with, well, here's how we differentiate our ability to solve that challenge, and it's AI, and here's how the AI works. I think that's a really good approach, as well as I think you're talking about needing these data points, these quantitative data points. So benchmarking studies, things that show here's how the conventional solution solves it, and here's the speed and all the key measures, and then here's how we do it. So you can actually prepare for those sales conversations with an end user like your firm, and come prepared, to show the difference about solving those challenges.
Yeah, I know you've covered this before at Cyber Theory. I've seen other presentations of yours for the vendors, and I know you've covered kind of the basic stuff. I mean, you never cold email me, never cold call me. I mean, that doesn't work with CISOs. If anything, it puts you on a blacklist. I mean, it's literally not worth your time. Find a forum somehow. If it's not RSA or Black Hat or B-Sides or whatever, if it's not IAPP, or if you're going to talk about governance solutions, or I'm in a group of CISOs here that meets periodically at events, right? And they're generally sponsored events. Find a solution like that so you can get in front of us and really talk to us about what we need. Those kind of spam emails or those cold calls, but not only do we ignore them, we remember them. And you don't want to be a vendor we remember for that.
That's true. And there's nothing wrong with telling the story about how this is going to help you. But as long as you're backing it up. I think, making sure that you have the opportunity to do that and really connect with the people and the problems they have, Julie, like you were saying, is important, but it doesn't stop there.
Good point.
Well, you guys are fantastic. You make my job so much easier, because you read my mind on the last topic here, which was going to be about vendors pitching their solutions to you. And I really think you covered it all. I was going to ask, maybe just as an add-on, who within your organization is actually like at the forefront of evaluating these offerings. I kind of think with some of these newer solutions that the vendors almost get a little bit of a pass, you know, a direct access to a CISO or a high level executive because they are so new, right? It's not implementing yet another endpoint solution or something like that. Is that actually the case? Are you literally at the forefront evaluating things, or do you relegate that to your team?
It depends. So I'm a bit unique as a CISO. I am a peer of the CIO. I do not report to the CIO. I report to our COO. And so I work with the IT team directly, and I will set parameters for what we need, but I leave it up to the engineers to pick the solution. I don't run it every day, they do. So why should I be the one to dictate something? I think, however, I am at the forefront of evaluating these technologies, at least getting them in front of the engineers, you know, 3 or 4 that we're going to look at. As far as that's for the cybersecurity IT side, for the, you know, the LLMs and the operational side, I'm leading our AI discussion group right now, and we as a group are evaluating these new solutions together. And I would say there are about 10 to 12 of us that are really evaluating at the forefront and then kind of passing it on to the rest of the organization. But I think in most organizations, you're going to see a CISO probably report to a CIO or a CFO. And I would say hopefully they're at the forefront, but they may also be delegating it to engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a team effort, right? You know, I think I will say categorically, I am the wrong person to approach. But there are whole teams of folks who are looking at this because it does take a huge amount of expertise. And even if it's just, I want one person thinking about the engineering side, I want one person thinking about the data governance side, and I want one person going through the contract with a fine tooth comb. You know, there's going to be a whole team involved.
I think you've made the case for, as they would call it in the marketing realm, account-based marketing. That is, that's what it is, right? You need to make sure you're messaging to more than just the unicorn, who is typically the CISO or the CIO. There's going to be lots of people involved, especially with technology as new and complex as implementing AI. Well, everyone, I really appreciate your time today. This has been a fantastic. It seemed like we blew through this, but lots of great input. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I need to give a shout out to our Cyber Ed board team. Both Heather and John are part of that Cyber Ed board community, and we actually worked with our colleagues here at the Cyber Ed board to put this together. They're actually the ones that reached out to John and Heather and brought them to this session. So kudos to our team there. Heather, John, Julie, fantastic input. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, and maybe we'll do it again. So thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Guys.
There's
Right.
always more for AI.
Yeah, and thank you to all of our listeners. Again, look out for the email. You'll be receiving notification when this is available on demand, and hope to see you at our next session. Thank you again.